everyone, I'm Billy. Welcome to Show and Tell. Today is going to be a little bit of a variation from a lot of knitting. I'll show you a little bit of knitting, but mostly it's going to be some nostalgic things that tie into how I became a knitter in the first place. So before I get into that, let me say a couple of things. First of all, you can find me on Ravelry and on Instagram as billietoy. And if you happen to like this episode at any time, please go into this corner and press that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. That just helps me get a better ranking with YouTube, which for those of you who don't know, YouTube is now owned by Google, so their search algorithm is pretty good. And they are looking for those likes. So help me to get more traffic, and I can go more places and do more things and knit more interesting projects to share with you. So in my very, very first episode, I talked about a little bit about who I am and growing up and becoming a knitter. But I really wanted to wind it all the way back to the very beginning to share with you some of the many, many craftsy things that I've been involved in throughout my life. Knitting is one of them. It has become the major one. But since I know you're mostly vintage knitters, I think you're all probably pretty nostalgic, as I am. So I'm going to go through a little bit of an exhaustive list. I hope that you'll find it interesting. And I'm looking over here because that's where my notes are. Sorry. So when I was a very young child, I wasn't a typical little girl. I had dolls. I had a variety of dolls, including the original 1959 Barbie, who stayed kind of pristine in her box. After I took her out to look at her and change her clothes, I put her back in the box. Unfortunately, in one of my mother's moves from one house to another, she got rid of that doll. It would be worth hundreds of dollars today. It was in mint condition. Anyway, I wasn't so interested in playing with dolls. I just didn't see the purpose of it. It didn't resonate with me. I was much more interested in doing things with my hands that were productive, building things, assembling things, painting, all different sorts of crafts. And I guess my mother noticed that because pretty early on she started putting things into my hands that would help me to achieve some of those goals. So the earliest thing that I can remember was that knitting knob that I showed you, that red wooden spool with the spokes on it that you weave the yarn around and pull through. That was in the same era of making pot holders. So I had one of those square looms, I'm sure many of you had, and those long fabric bands that stretched, and you would place them horizontally and then you would weave through vertically. I did that same kind of thing with paper, where you would cut slats in the paper and weave strips of construction paper through to get all sorts of interesting designs. So those are things that perhaps others of you have done. My mother also gave me some small, I guess they were meant to be fingertip towels with embroidery, and they were child-oriented. The one that I remember, and I so wish I still had it, was of a little lamb. How apropos. A little lamb, and to make the little curls, she taught me how to do what I think is called a French knot, where you put the needle through and you wrap the thread around it and then go back on the outside, and it creates a little, like a bobble, but with embroidery thread. And it was just a cute little scene. Maybe it even had Mary and her little, not Mary. Yeah, Mary had a little lamb. Yeah, some little figure maybe was with it. I had mentioned before that my mother had me knitting 4-inch squares. Just knit squares. Here, Billy, here's another color, knit another square. And I showed you in a prior episode my original turquoise plastic knitting needles that she had given me, size 6 needles. Also, back in that time period, there was a lot of construction with popsicle sticks. We had in our neighborhood a popsicle truck that would come around, so in the summertime we were always eating popsicles. But then certainly when I went to day camp and overnight camp, there were arts and crafts things where we were doing a lot with those popsicles. And I captured an image, which I'll show at the end, of somebody on eBay who's selling a similar thing to the kinds of things I built. I also remember taking those metal hair clips that you pinched and they opened up like an alligator clip, but they were small. They were about that big. I remember taking those and cutting out felt in the shape of like a hand or pot holder and gluing the two pieces of felt on the front clip and two pieces of felt on the back clip and decorating it with sequins and maybe beads, just gluing them on, and it was a bookmark. So all these little practical, little construction type things. Then I became influenced, I guess, by some of my mother's friends and some of the adult things that they were doing, like macrame. Macrame became very big. I guess that was in the 60s. And, oh my goodness, I did hangings for plants that you could put your flower pot in and it would hang. I made wall decorations. I made a shoulder bag, many macrame things with the cord that you would knot. I also had, and you'll see a picture at the end, kits to make mosaic tile ashtrays and bowls where you would just lay these tiles. The tiles came on, I think they came on a mesh, and there was grout that you mixed, and you put the grout around the tiles to hold them in place. Maybe you popped the tiles off the mesh. I'm not remembering now, but that was another project where the end result was an object. We were also, everybody was doing these gravel paintings. I remember doing several of them that were a couple, maybe 2 or 3 feet long. And there was black cord, and I guess the design was already on the board, but you would lay out this cord, and then there were bags of gravel, like the kind of gravel you would use today at the bottom of a fish bowl or fish tank, in pretty colors. And it was kind of like paint by number, which I also did, but using gravel. And people would hang these in their living rooms. They were very mid-century. I have an image of one of those that was similar to one that I did that'll be at the end of this whole long story. Now, next door to us was a woman who my mother was very, very friendly with. My mother was divorced, and this woman was also single. She had no children, but she was interested in copying a couple of paintings that she was fond of. And she bought for me little canvas boards, and I was painting the same painting that she was painting, just a portion of it, like a detail of the original painting. And I think we were working with oil paints. I'm pretty sure it was oil. I don't have these anymore, but that was probably my first foray into doing something that was more like an adult painting. And later on, when I got to college, because I studied engineering and I was taking a lot of math and other types of science courses, physics, chemistry, and so forth, I tried to round out my schedule with some courses that were more artistic because I was interested in both things. I wasn't serious enough to be interested in the arts to make a profession out of that. I was more leaning towards math. But I was probably a lot more well-rounded than a lot of the other engineering students. I was definitely an anomaly. I was taking Andrew Sarris's Monday Night at the Movies class where we looked at Hitchcock films and so forth. But I also took a wood sculpture course, and I took a drawing class because I was convinced that the only things I could draw were geometric engineering type drawings. But I thought it would be very useful at some point in my life to know how to draw the human figure. So I took a drawing class with a wonderful artist named Dave Lund. I think that he might still be alive. He's well into his 90s. And I enjoyed his class so much and his style of teaching. I could see the progression from the beginning of the semester when my drawings looked really crude and childlike to something that was actually not bad. So I liked his style so much, I decided to go on with him and take his painting class. And this painting that's behind me would probably knock his socks off because I didn't go about painting this in the way that he was teaching at all. This is a pure, unadulterated copy of a famous painting, but more about Tamara de Lempicka, the artist of that, my copy of hers, later on. I'll do a whole bit about that. So let's see, what else? Just a cute little thing. You know, women who are staying at home, my mother actually worked, but I think a lot of women back in the 60s and 70s were doing all kinds of interesting projects. I don't know if they're still doing these kinds of things today, but one of the things was we took washcloths and we rolled them into like 2 cigar rolls side by side and put a bar of soap underneath that and then pinned into the soap little sequins to make eyes. And I don't remember if there was something for a tail, but it turned out to be like a little cat that was a bar of soap with a washcloth. And it was a nice little hostess favor or something like that. We made a bunch of those. We were also doing beaded flowers where you would insert wire through the beads and shape them into different strands that would form a petal, and then you could bend the petal into the shape of an iris or a rose or daisy, whatever kind of flower. We also did beaded fruit. There were like plastic fruit-shaped things you could buy at hobby shops, and then you would buy these beads, and you would stick a pin through the bead. I think there might have even been like a little bead on top of the main bead, but it made like a jeweled fruit, and people would have these fruit bowls on their dining tables filled with all this beaded fruit as a centerpiece. Very interesting. I also went through a phase where I wanted to build models. Now, I wasn't interested in model airplanes, but there were other things, and one of the models that I assembled and painted was a vintage Jaguar. It was a real bulbous kind of a car, and it had all the little parts, the windshield, the side mirrors, the interior, the little back window. It was really a lot of plastic pieces and a whole schematic that you had to follow step by step to assemble it, much like a model airplane would be, but it appealed to me more. When I ran out of things that were like that weren't sort of super masculine, I ended up with a model of a witch's house with her cauldron, and she was wearing her hat, and there was a broom. So that was another assemblage that got painted with like airplane paints afterwards. Now, because my dad remarried, and the woman he married had 3 children of her own who were all slightly older than I was also somewhat influenced by what they were doing, particularly my 2 older stepsisters. And one of the things I remember doing with them, back in the days when telephones had wiring, not wireless or cellular like today, but phones were hardwired, the telephone installation men or telephone repairmen would have these huge cables. You've seen today tables sometimes made out of these large wooden cables, and wrapped around them were these, that was like the spool that this cabling was wrapped around. The cables were thick, and inside were dozens of very thin copper wires that were wrapped in different colors. So there might be like green with a yellow and orange stripe, there might be red with a blue stripe, all different color combinations. And I guess they were able to detect by the specific color of that wire what that specific wire got hooked up to. So I don't know how my stepsisters got a hold of this wire, but we had bits of it that we would form into small figures, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and you could mold them, kind of like things that I guess Alexander Calder was making. We would make little people, and they would have different color outfits when you put like a different color wire around their torso. So that was another thing. They were also the ones who got me into a little bit of beading. Now I'm going to show you this. Actually, I have 2 of these. These were not my original baby bracelet from when I was born, but I think before my time they did used to put these little bracelets on babies in the hospital with pink beads for girls and blue beads for boys. So this was one of mine, and for some reason, I don't know, maybe that one got small and I needed another one, but this wire is 14 karat gold. So jewelers were actually making these up for people, and these are real cultured pearls, and the beads are glass beads. It's not plastic. The white ones are plastic. But these beads were available, all the letters of the alphabet. So a lot of girls my age were hooking their letters of their name together and using other beads, not fine jewelry and not 14 karat gold wiring. But these baby bracelets were a real thing at a certain period of time when I was young. So I did try my hand a little bit at making jewelry. I also did origami. I went to high school with a gal who was so accomplished at it. I mean, I never got to be that good, but Susan Starr, I think for her Sweet 16, made a different animal for each person who was invited, and that was their place card. I did some of it, but not like her. I also came home from school one day saying, Mom, I want to make cracked marbles. So we had an old pot. I don't think you could use this pot once you did your glass marbles in it. And I don't remember how we did it, but I think it was the concept of you heat these things up and then maybe you put cold water or something. But marbles would kind of crackle and it would make a very interesting effect. I don't know what I used them for. I don't think they were part of jewelry or anything. I'm not sure, but it was just kind of a fun thing to do, and I remember them being beautiful. Also, another thing that girls at my time were doing was decoupage. Lunch boxes were another thing. So you could have a regular little, kids' rectangular lunchbox, and then you would cut out pictures from magazines that you liked and assemble them, glue them on to all the sides of this lunchbox, and then lacquer over it. But I remember getting a different kind of a lunchbox because I thought it would be like a really nifty pocketbook for me that was like men would be carrying to a work site if they were bringing their lunch with them. So those kind of taller ones that had like a curved top to them where the top lifts up, kind of like a trunk but in metal. And I remember mine being black, and I had it loaded with all kinds of really colorful pictures, and I carried it as a handbag for quite a while. So that was yet another thing. I also remember another girl in my high school, Ruth Hershey, had double-sided crepe paper, and I remember doing this with her. She would cut out the petals of like rose shape, starting with larger petals and then increasing all the way down. So in the beginning, she would start with florist tape, that green tape, on a wire, and she would put one petal at a time building up, building around, and I did it as well. So on the inside it might be a darker red, and the outside of the crepe paper was like pink, so your flower actually looked like almost like a real flower. They were so beautiful, so intricate. Let me see what else. Oh yeah, another thing that we did at camp, and some of you might have done this as well, there was a material called gimp. It was like a thin plastic stretchy kind of stuff, and we would make lanyards out of it. There were different sequences of steps that you could make a box shape with 4 pieces going east, north, south, and west, and you would keep going around, and it would keep elongating into like a square shape. But there were fancier patterns. I did a lot of that. I also did a bit of sewing. In 7th grade, we had home economics. The boys took shop, but the girls did a session of sewing and a session of cooking. So in my sewing class, I learned how to thread up the bobbin and the needle, and we had a sewing machine at home that had belonged to my grandmother. So on my own, I did a couple of projects. I made a very simple dress for myself. I made a tote bag. I made an apron. I also tried my hand at needlepoint for a little while, and I hooked a rug. I made a pink, gray, and white rug. I was already adult, I think, when I did that. Getting back to camp and college. When I was in college, again, I talked about the drawing and the painting class and the wood sculpture class. I also took a pottery course, which was an extracurricular. I wasn't getting credit for that. And we worked on a wheel, so I was throwing pots. And I got to be pretty accomplished at making simple things like mugs and small vases. And over the course of 4 years, I became quite accomplished. I had made plates, I had made chip and dip trays, I made planters with a tray on the bottom to catch the water. But I would say the high point of my pottery career was a teapot. So I pulled out of my closet. I've gotten rid of most of my pottery, but I pulled out of my closet today to show you the teapot that I made. So I want to walk you through why I'm so proud of this, because to make a teapot is really quite something. First of all, the lid. See how the sides are angled in? That's so that it fits in easily. And also notice there's no glaze around the edge because, I forget why. It's glazed on the inside. I think it's just hard to control it dripping off, so that's unglazed, as is this whole interior rim. But there is something about rims in pottery, and that is that they should be thick enough, because they take a lot of wear and tear. They should be rounded and thick enough that they don't chip easily. Also the handle, you want it to be something that is sturdy, that you can grip. And this has, pretty significant surface area that you can grip it by. These little, I guess you would call them handles. I don't know what they're called, but that you attach the handle to, these little loops, also have to be on here very securely. And of course the glaze helps hold that on, but you want those to be heavy enough to support the weight of this when it's filled with water. Another thing, which I don't know if you'll be able to see, probably not, yeah, maybe, right in here, if you see something that's looking like a different color, those are holes. They're perforations that will catch the tea leaves if you use loose tea in here. And that's a rough area. It's partially unglazed to make it a little more grabby. Another area that should be a little roughened is the very tip of the spout, because when you pour, you don't want water dripping out afterwards. You want it to cut off, and that helps it cut off. There's a lot of ergonomics to this thing that make it pour out. So the shape of everything, every aspect of it, is kind of critical. Anyway, I kept this because I think that was a real achievement, to be able to make a functioning, ergonomically proper teapot. So because of my skill in pottery, at some point during college, I was invited to become a specialty counselor at an overnight camp in the Poconos. And I had never done low fire clay before. I had always done high fire. This is stoneware that gets fired to a very high temperature. But for kids, more colorful things have to be done in a different way, different heat intensity. And the kilns that they had were a different type of kiln for the camp. Anyway, I learned from this woman who was a friend of the owner of the camp all the little things that I would need to know to fill in what I already knew about pottery. And with the camp, we weren't doing stuff on a wheel. A lot of it was slip cast molds and so forth. But that was a summer job that I had when I was in college, which I look back on very fondly. I met some wonderful other college students that summer, some of whom I'm still in touch with, amazingly. Let's see, as life went on, I also took a darkroom photography course. My dad taught me how to use a single lens reflex camera, and I took it to another level. He had a darkroom in his house, but I didn't know how to develop my own film, so I took a course to learn how to do that and to print, to mix the chemicals and actually print. So yet another somewhat artistic, if you want to say arts and crafts kind of endeavor. I think that's about it, but of course you know my knitting story. If you haven't seen episode 1, I talk a little about it there, so you can go back and watch that. But as I was putting this list together, I just couldn't help. Oh, wait, I forgot one thing. I have it out here to show you. With my stepsisters, we were doing a lot of beading. I did not do this beading, but we had small looms and little beads like this. Tandy beads, I remember the company. They had larger beads that were called pony beads, and then these very small ones. This is an American Indian leather belt that unfortunately no longer fits me, but I kept it because I thought it's such a beautiful piece. But I used to do this kind of beading, so we made little bracelets and things. I think that's the only thing I forgot. Anyway, as I was making this list, I couldn't help but think of my very favorite composer and songwriter, Cole Porter. I'm a huge Cole Porter fan. It hasn't come up at all in any of these episodes, but I love music from the 1930s and 40s and even into the 50s very, very much. I know the lyrics to many of those American songbook standards. But this song, I'm not going to sing. You heard me sing once before. I'm not going to go there again. But one of the most famous Cole Porter tunes, and it's in keeping with my Hollywood, Broadway theme here. One of the most famous Cole Porter tunes is from the 1934 Broadway show called Anything Goes. And the lyrics are kind of like the laundry list I just went through with you, and I think they're really clever, so I wanted to share them with you. Also, I will give a link down below to a cheat sheet in case you're not familiar with some of these things, like what's a Bendel bonnet. You'll have a cheat sheet, and you could go look that up. You're the Top You're the Colosseum. You're the top. You're the Louvre Museum. You're a melody from a symphony by Strauss. You're a Bendel bonnet, a Shakespeare sonnet. You're Mickey Mouse. You're the Nile. You're the Tower of Pisa. You're the smile on the Mona Lisa. I'm a worthless check, a total wreck, a flop. But if baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top. Now, gifted humans like Vincent Humans might think that your song is bad, but for a person who's just rehearsing, well, I gotta say this, my lad. You're the top. You're Mahatma Gandhi. You're the top. You're Napoleon Brandy. You're the purple light of a summer night in Spain. You're the National Gallery. You're Garbo Salary. You're cellophane. You're sublime. You're a turkey dinner. You're the time of the Derby winner. I'm a toy balloon that is fated soon to pop. But if baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top. You're the top. You're a Ritz hot toddy. You're the top. You're a booster body. You're the boats that glide on the sleepy Zyder Z. You're a Nathan Panning. You're Bishop Manning. You're broccoli. You're a prize. You're a knight at Coney. You're the eyes of Irene Bordoni. I'm a broken doll, a falderall, a blop. But if baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top. You're the top. You're an arrow collar. You're the top. You're a Coolidge dollar. You're the nimble tread of the feet of Fred Astaire. You're an O'Neill drama. You're Whistler's mama. You're Camembert. You're a rose. You're Inferno's Dante. You're the nose of the great Durante. I'm just in the way, as the French would say, de trop. But if baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top. You're the top. You're a Waldorf salad. You're the top. You're a Berlin ballad. You're a baby grand of a lady and a gent. You're an old Dutch master. You're Mrs. Astor. You're Pepsodent. You're romance. You're the steps of Russia. You're the pants on a Roxy Usher. I'm a lazy lout that's just about to stop. But if baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top. You're the top. You're a dance in Bali. You're the top. You're a hot tamale. You're an angel. You're simply too divine. You're a Botticelli. You're Keats. You're Shelley. You're Ovaltine. You're a boon. You're the dam at Boulder. You're the moon over Mae West's shoulder. I'm a nominee of the GOP or GOP. But if baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top. You're the top. You're the Tower of Babel. You're the top. You're the Whitney Stable. By the River Rhine, you're a sturdy stein of beer. You're a dress from Saks. You're next year's taxes. You're stratosphere. You're my thoist. You're a drumstick, lipstick. You're the foist in the Irish swipstick. I'm a frightened frog that can find no log to hop. But if baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top. So that last little reference to Saks reminds me of a film that I saw again recently for the umpteenth time with Marilyn Monroe, Lauren Bacall, and Betty Grable called How to Marry a Millionaire. And I'm going to put a picture at the end of William Powell arriving at the apartment of these three young women with the purchases that one of them made at Bergdorf Goodman. They use the name Bergdorf Goodman in the movie, but the boxes that he was carrying in are the boxes, not of Bergdorf, but of Saks Fifth Avenue. How do I know that? Not because I bought a lot of things at Saks, or Bergdorf for that matter, but because my mother's hat box clearly is from Saks Fifth Avenue, and it has this very distinctive brown and beige plaid on it. So don't always believe what you see in the movies. You have to be informed. That's my little Hollywood blurb for this episode. You've been seeing this painting in the background of many of my episodes, and I thought today would be a good day to tell you about how this painting came into being. First of all, it started with the frame. How I came to acquire this frame is kind of like a funny story. When our son was in elementary school, the school held an auction, and there was a silent auction, but they also had a live auction with an actual auctioneer. So a painting in a frame was held up, not this painting, a very ugly painting that was black and brown, and it had, I don't know, like a sunset. It really wasn't attractive. And I don't remember what price they started the bidding at, but maybe it was like $200, and no one bid. And the auctioneer kept lowering the price and lowering the price, and at $50, still no one wanted to bid. So I raised my hand and I said, I'll bid $10 just for the frame. And everybody laughed because everybody knew how ugly the painting was. So, of course, I had the winning bid. I brought the frame home. I popped out that painting, and I was about to throw it away. And my mother said, wait, you don't know. It could be something really valuable. I said, don't worry, Mother. It's not. I threw it away, and I brought the measurements to a local art shop that is no longer in business, unfortunately. It was around for forever, called Pearl Paint. Ironically, my mother's name was also Pearl. And I took in a copy of a book with paintings by this artist who you're looking at, Tamara de Lempicka. That's not the artist in the painting, but the woman who painted this painting, Tamara de Lempicka. I have a book of her paintings and her life story, which is fascinating. And I showed the guy in the paint shop this painting, and I said, I want to copy this painting. Can you help me to select the right colors? So he gave me a little tutorial on how to blend certain colors to get the skin tone. And anyway, even though I had taken a painting class in college, I thought the most expeditious way of doing this was to draw a grid on my canvas, and on a photocopy of the image from the book, I drew a similar grid, and then one square at a time, I copied whatever was in that square onto the canvas, and then I started to paint in the colors, and it was a very interesting process. Now, the reason that I chose to copy this painting and not purchase the original is because Tamara de Lempicka now happens to be the second most expensive female artist of all time, the first being Georgia O'Keeffe. Now, it's very interesting. Her name isn't at all well known, but her works are in the collections of people like Barbra Streisand, Jack Nicholson, Tim Rice, who was the lyricist of a lot of Andrew Lloyd Webber's shows, and Madonna. I'm not sure who currently owns this one, if it's in a private collection or in a museum, but this is a portrait of Madame Boucard, and her husband was, he invented some kind of a medicine for indigestion, I think, something like that. I'm going to put an image of Portrait de Marjorie Ferry from 1932, another painting by Tamara de Lempicka, which sold for $21.1 million earlier this year, setting a record for the artist and catapulting her into that second place amongst women artists after Georgia O'Keeffe. I have a little quote from Christie's, the auction house. They quoted Tamara de Lempicka as once saying about herself, "Among 100 paintings, you could always recognize mine. The galleries put me in the best rooms, always in the center, because my painting attracted people. It was neat, it was finished." This year, right around now, a Broadway show about her was supposed to open, but unfortunately because of the pandemic, it's being held up. There's also a movie in the works, I heard her great-granddaughter recently say. So if you weren't familiar with her before, you are now, and you might have seen a couple of her paintings pop up in some of my earlier podcasts. Someday I'm planning to do something with those, so you never know what tricks I have up my sleeve. Sometimes we'll be going back to things in the past. I'm very good at that. My mother used to say you go down memory lane all the time. So knitting, I wanted to not overlook, including a little knitting in my knitting podcast. So I think I had mentioned this scarf that I was knitting for my son and how I ordered too much yarn because I was paranoid about not having enough to finish it, and when it became available from Germany, I ordered a bunch. So the scarf is almost done. I just have to weave in the ends. He wanted not a hat, but a balaclava. So in the same yarn, I've knit him a balaclava, not from any particular pattern. I just sort of improvised. And you see this one string hanging here because he decided that he wants me to fill this in with some short rows and cover more of his face. But it fit really well. I was really proud of myself. And then, because I still have plenty of yarn, I'm embarking on making a pair of mittens for him. So I'm doing them 2 at a time. I think that's probably the smartest way to go. Using, I guess you'd call this magic loop. I'm not sure if there's another name for that. But yeah, if you don't know how to do this 2 at a time thing, you cast on half of one, the whole of another, and then you come back and finish the second part of the original one. So you get them all on here and you knit around in a loop. The pandemic has been kind of wonderful for me. I really have no complaints. I have so many projects that were stowed away in a plastic bin for the better part of a year, probably some of them even longer than that. And being at home so much has afforded me the opportunity to dig into that bin time and again and pull out things that I want to finish. So my recent puller outer is this, which is a summer sweater. It's cotton. This yarn is very interesting. I'll get the name of it up on the screen. I think it's by Lang. It has a really cute name. It's kind of like a polka dots built into the yarn itself. So I'm in the process of knitting my sleeves 2 at a time because I want the striping to come out even on the sleeves. I don't want it to be random. So it's a little bit tricky, but let me see if I can show you. This is the V-back tee. So I'm almost done. I left the bottom on a cable as a holder in case I have enough yarn when I'm done the sleeves that I can lengthen the body. But I just didn't want the whole episode to go by without including some knitting. This garment is designed to be worn with the back in the front or the front in the back, both ways. So kind of reversible. Should be pretty plain. But I love this yarn. When I saw it, I just couldn't get over how cool it was, that there are these thick and thin blips in it. And those are woven right in. And some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller, and the repeats change. Sometimes there's a long span between those darker blue dots. So it's a self-striping yarn, but in a very unconventional way. What, me be conventional? Okay, the jewelry story. So I've got a lot going on here. This is an Art Deco piece. It's not jade. It's meant to look like jade. I would say that it's probably celluloid, I'm guessing there. And these beads also, they're not jade. They're something faux. The pearls are probably real. Anyway, that's that. The earrings are jade. These were my grandmother's. This is also jade with cloisonné beads. And that was my mother's. And this also was my mother's. It's a contemporary piece done with ivory beads. But the artist who designed this piece incorporated netsuke, a Japanese netsuke. This is what samurai warriors wore on their belts, I guess to hold things in place. And she's probably not ivory. She might be bone. I think we're good for today. So let me say toodaloo. I'll see you next time. Thanks for stopping by. Pleasure to see you again, and till the next time.